know what they were like back in their lands of origin, if you know what they were like, then it's no wonder that the founding culture of America was built on stolen land, was built on enslaved labor. It was built on a set of decorative ideological documents declaring all men created equal, while viewing only their own kindred as men, their only skin tone as men. Understand, this isn't hypocrisy, not in the ordinary sense. No, they're being completely consistent. They're being completely consistent with their ancestral culture and their ancestral thinking. Dehumanization is an unspoken but fully understood and fully accepted component of their framing of equality. See, they'll say all people are equal, but what they won't say, but what they believe, is that not all people are people.
For them, this goes without saying. It goes without saying. So when you ask who is white in America, the honest answer is, who is white is whoever the system needs to be white at any given moment, in exchange, like I say, for enforcing it against those who are not. It's not a heritage, it's a job description. You understand? And the job is maintenance and enforcement of a hierarchical, predatory, exploitative, inhuman, oppressive, and ruthless social order. That's the job. And the upholding and the affirmation of and the advocacy for and the perpetuation of a backwards, primitive, simplistic, dishonest, shallow, immoral, immature, animalistic, satanic culture. That's the truth. So this is the background, this is the origin, this is the genealogy, the real DNA of American culture and the American system. Not your fake history, not your fairy tales and your fables, not your Johnny Appleseed, and not some ahistorical and unfactual whiteness. We're talking about a particular people coming from a particular region or from particular regions who have specific histories, who have specific lineages, cultural lineage, lineage of habits, lineage of ways of acting, ways of thinking, ways of operating in the world, that trace back consistently, trace back for millennia. Scavengers, hunters and gatherers, raiders and marauders, in the harsh wilderness of Germany, for example, what's now Germany, to the frigid Nordic lands in Scandinavia, to the barren, inhospitable rock of an island that's known now as the UK, the Gauls, the Franks, the French, the Anglo-Saxons, and so forth. Pagan, jinn-worshipping, constantly warring, constantly invading each other, pillaging each other, thieves and killers, tyrants and oppressors. That's the origin. Forever scrambling and fighting each other for dominance over resources in their own lands. Feudal lords and serfs. The very existence of America itself is the proof, all the proof that you need that this is the case. Europe was so vicious and so unlivable that the Europeans themselves fled to America. If it had been a fair and just and beautiful and enlightened and wonderful civilization, well, nobody would have had to run away from it. And this is the other thing that you have to understand, that the people who did run away from it, the people who ran away from it, did so because they wanted to be able to be themselves like the people that they were running away from. Do you understand me? They were tired of being robbed. They were tired of being oppressed. And they wanted to have a chance to be the ones doing the robbing. They wanted to have a chance to be the ones doing the oppressing. And that's why you have a country over there right now. That's why you have a country. And that's why the country is the way that it is. And that's why you are the way that you are. And like I say, whether you're classified as so-called white or you're classified as so-called black in that society, in that so-called civilization, or if you come from any sort of non-European, non-Anglo-Saxon origins, and whether you're rich and whether you're poor, whether you're upper class or lower class or working class, whether you're white collar or blue collar, whether you call yourself a conservative or you call yourself...
Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you are doing great. I've seen Shade Bolson trying to describe the nature, the culture, what really white people are, and generally the life that they lived. So most of the time, I usually argue that, you see, white people say that they came with civilization. But when you get to look at the type of life that they led, I mean, that time that they described what they called civilization. At the same time, they called black people savages. But when you try to compare the two, you really get to see who are savages and who are civilized. Because as a matter of fact, I can tell you that we know very well who are savages, and we know very well who add the civilization. So all these things happen at the same time. But you understand, the history has always gone according to the person who had the power of the pen and the paper. So the person who had the power to write on the pen and the paper wrote something else. But we all know the truth. And this is some truth that is being exposed for everyone to get to see, for everyone to get to understand, and just see how everything unravels. Because that's just perfect description of what culture, history of white people. Majority of them won't accept this. But there was so much savagery going on, especially during the early times. You talk about pillage, you talk about rape, you talk about doing all those nasty things to each other. Look at the type of life that the Vikings led. I mean, even the movie Vikings, if you've watched it, will expose to you everything that you need to know, everything that you need to understand, everything that you need to see for yourself, how everything unraveled. So they lied to us. They lied to us about civilization. Because even before spreading all this badness that is in the world today, they started with themselves. They started fighting against themselves because that's their culture. They started doing all these nasty things to each other, the nasty type of life that they lived. So you all can get to see the truth. Today the world is in shambles. But ask yourself, who created all this chaos? You know the answer. So when you try to compare the lives that black people led and the lives that white people led, you get to see, or you get to know the truth. People choose the truth that they want. White people chose the truth that they want because they were not comfortable to get to know the truth. So the video that you're seeing is by Shahid Bolson from the Middle Nation. And I'm saying it again. The video that you're watching is from Shahid Bolson from the Middle Nation. And he got two channels. The first channel is the Middle Nation. And the second channel is King Shahid Bolson. So make sure to go and check them out. Subscribe, like, interact with his content, because it really shares some good masterpiece that we all need to learn, that we all need to know. So brothers and sisters, until then, I want us to watch this video, and then I'm going to be back. Then we'll have a discussion in regards to this. And if you're watching me for the first time, I'm asking you to please subscribe to the channel, join the membership. I really get to see what I can offer you. And for those always coming back, watching my videos, man, I'm really, really grateful for all the support that you are all giving me. But until then, let's watch the video. I'm going to be back with my thoughts and commentaries in regards to this. Let's get into it.
For liberal, whether you call yourself a traditionalist or you call yourself a progressive, whether you're on the right or whether you're on the left, I'm telling you, the psyche, the mentality, the frameworks, the paradigms, the way of understanding, and the way of interacting and engaging, all of that, all of what I have just described regarding those Europeans, all of that is in you now. It's in you now because of all the mechanisms and all the institutions that I've been talking about. You've been Europeanized. You've been Anglo-Saxonized. You've been Germanized. That's that vat of acid that I said that you've been in, which you call the melting pot. But you, if you're a so-called minority in America, you didn't come from where they came from. You didn't live their ancestors' lives. You don't have their 10,000-year history. But you've been sucked into the riptide of that history, out of your own ancestral waters into the thick, polluted ocean of theirs. Now their pathologies are your pathologies. Their psyche is your psyche. Their mentality is your mentality. And the most distinctive thing about them is their absolutely unbreakable resistance to change and improvement. You don't change them, they change you into them. You understand me? Every single phase of their history is nothing but rebranding of the same culture, from pagan to Christian, from Christian to secular, from feudal to free market, from monarchy to democracy. These are all just veneers over a perfectly undented, completely intact structure of primal, permanent primitivity. You know, like how those tech CEOs, those rich people and whatnot, they want to upload their brains to a computer. They want to upload their brain into the cloud or something like that so that they can live on after they die. Well, you're the cloud. You're the cloud. You're the computer. Your society is. Those 10,000-year-old hunters and gatherers and marauders of Northern Europe and Western Europe, they got uploaded into the cloud. And now every one of you, every single one of you, is a device into which it has been downloaded, and it has erased completely your previous system, your previous operating system, your culture, your heritage, your history. Now you are the carriers of that culture, and you are the carriers of that heritage, which is not your own. That's why I say there's the origin and there's the originators. There's the impact, and then there are the impacted. But at the end of the day, you're all Westerners now. You're all Westerners now, and you are all carrying on the history of those Europeans, even if you didn't come from there. You're carrying on their culture now, even though it's not your culture. It's not the culture that you come from originally. And now you're carrying on that same mindset, that same mentality. You have that same psyche. It doesn't matter if you're oppressed. It doesn't matter if you're oppressed over there. Remember what I said? The people who ran away from Europe to start that country to begin with, they were oppressed too. But they had the same mind as their oppressors. And it was actually that same mindset of their oppressors that made them run away in the first place. You understand? And this is what we see from you in the U.S. now. This is what we see from you. You're complaining about what? You're complaining about your material conditions, about your cost of living, about your wages, about your working conditions, and so forth, about access to resources. Now, I'm not saying that those aren't genuine issues. Those are genuine issues. But you're not interested in the underlying causes of those issues, the root causes. You just want to get the things that you want. You just want your material comfort secured. So it's the same mentality. It's exactly the same mentality. Same instincts have been programmed into you. Even if your ancestral heritage is actually from a genuine civilization that actually understands the purpose of life as being more than that, more than material comfort, even if the culture of your ancestors had much more profound values than that, and they could find meaning and they could find contentment, they could find happiness in any situation, regardless of what their resources they had, or what comfort they had, or what discomfort they had to suffer. But that's not your culture anymore. Now you have the mentality of a European scavenger from 10,000 years ago. Even if your particular ancestors came from Asia, or your ancestors came from Africa or South America. Because that culture and that system obliterates everything but itself, I'm telling you. And unless you are a direct immigrant, like right now, an immigrant or a child of immigrants, if you're a first or second generation immigrant, a first or second generation American, and you still have family back in the motherland, you have connections and so forth. If you're not like that, if your family has been over there for more than a few generations, then you don't have any genuine connection to your ancestral culture, no matter what it is, no matter what culture it is. You can perform a connection, but you don't have a connection, not in any meaningful way, not in any functional way. In other words, to the people in your lands of origin, you're not going to be looked at as an us, you're going to be looked at as a them. I mean, if we're going to say that Western means white and white means Western, if we're going to say that white means carrying the culture, if we're going to go with that sort of a definition, then to everyone outside of America, every American is white, even if they're not looked upon as being white in America. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you are oppressed in America. It doesn't matter. That's irrelevant to this. Even if you're oppressed in America because in America you're not so-called white, you're still going to be seen as white by everyone outside because you're Western and you have a Western mentality. Even your so-called racial pride, you understand? Being proud of the fictional category that you have been assigned by the descendants of Europeans who artificially engineered a group identity for you by means of their insane discrimination and their insane hatred on the basis of the fictional categories that they themselves invented. Do you understand? You understand how crazy this is? That is entirely and uniquely Western. What you call black and brown people do not think of themselves as black and brown people anywhere in the world. They think of themselves as what they are. They think of themselves as Zulu or Kikuyu or Malay or Malayali or Tamil or what have you. I mean, in addition to being Kenyan, in addition to being Malaysian or whatever nationality it is, their complexion is not how they identify, unless they're forced to identify with it because they're dealing with you, because this completely insignificant, completely superficial and meaningless aspect is literally the only thing that you see. And the only thing that determines how you're going to deal with them and how you're going to treat them. I mean, whether you discriminate against them or whether you align with them, it's the same. You're seeing them as their color. It doesn't matter if you're aligning with them or you're discriminating against them, because you're doing it on the basis of something that does not matter to them at all, but means everything to you, because you're Western. It's like Muslim da'is who debate with Christians using the Bible. Not because we think the Bible is valid, but because they think that the Bible is valid. So you won't listen to us if we talk to you about the Quran, so the da'i will customize it according to your level. Well, the Western level forces everyone to pretend that their made-up color chart of identity and race is valid, because it's valid to Westerners, only to Westerners. So do you see how disconnected that makes you from everyone in the world? No one else believes in this color is a race, color as nation, color as race, color as identity. They know their lineage, they know their tribe, they know their family, they know their history, they know their beliefs, they know their customs, and so on. They know everything that actually makes them a truly distinct people. Do you know how idiotic it is? How idiotic it is to think that people are supposed to get along with each other just because they have similarities in their appearance? It's literally as ludicrous as that comedy sketch, Tim Robinson, Shirt Brothers, right? Like we're wearing the same shirt, therefore we're brothers now. Who thinks like that? Who thinks like that? We look alike, so now we have to be part of the same group. Meanwhile, you actually have completely different history. You come from a different place. You have different beliefs. You have a different faith. You have different language, right? You have a different culture. Your living conditions are different. And we have absolutely nothing in common whatsoever in any meaningful, substantive way. But there's some sort of a similar aspect in how you physically look, so that now we're on the same team. Why would anyone do that? Well, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why they would do it. The only reason they would do that only under very specific conditions, only very specific scenario or situation, which is that they are dealing with someone who does not look like them. You understand me? Someone who does not look like them and who treats people according to how they look. And because that person is the one that they're dealing with, that person's framework has to be factored into how you interact with them. But then the next question is, why does their framework take precedence? Why is their framework catered to, but they don't have to cater to our frameworks or understand our frameworks? And the obvious reason for that, the obvious answer to that, is that you're dealing with a dangerous and violent person. And because they are dangerous and violent, I'm talking about the West, no one ever risks correcting their stupidity and arrogance. So that just ends up solidifying your disconnection from the rest of the people of the world. And it keeps you steeped in your own stupidity and ignorance and arrogance. So if you're someone in America whose heritage is from the global South, if you are by lineage, not by color, by lineage, a member of the global majority, and you're living in America, and in America you are classified as minorities, and in America you think of yourselves as so-called black or so-called brown people, well, you are perpetuating European thinking, Anglo-Saxon thinking. You are perpetuating Western thinking. Or if you want to call it white thinking, yes. Only a white mind thinks of you that way. Only white eyes see you that way. The people that you come from don't see you that way. The people that you come from don't think of you that way. And people who look like you, but who are not the people that you come from by heritage, they do not see you that way either, and they do not think of you that way either. And the people that you come from are not going to embrace you because you look like them. They will embrace you because you are like them. Do you understand me? And if you're not like them, then looking like them is not going to count for anything with them. That's not going to win you any points, because it shouldn't. Because externally, you might look like them, but internally, mentally, you are thinking with the Western mind. You're thinking with the colonizer's mind. You're thinking with the oppressor's mind about yourself and about them. I hope you understand me. Affected and infected. But theoretically, you at least do have an actual culture that you can try to connect to. An alternative culture that you can try to connect to. The culture that your ancestors came from. Now, if you're African American, as in if you're a descendant of enslaved Africans, I'm saying, not the children of African immigrants, but the descendants of enslaved people, then obviously this is not going to be a straightforward issue for you. Inshallah, I'll talk more about that in a minute. And if you're part of the American shrinking majority, so-called white people, you're part of the global minority, you see, The shrinking majority, even when they created the supercategory of whiteness, even when they created the supercategory of whiteness and they added all of these people to it, incorporated all of these people that they used to exclude from that category, like the Irish, like the Italians, like the Slavs and so forth, the Eastern Europeans and so on. Even when they did that, they still can't maintain a majority in their own country. And they can't prevent their decline in demographic numbers. Imagine if they still counted, or if they still didn't count the Irish and the Italians and the Eastern Europeans as white. What if they still didn't? They'd already be a minority in that country. If you took out the Italians, if you took out the Irish, you took out the Jews, you took out the Slavs, then so-called white people in that country would maybe be 30% of the population in America. But okay, if you're someone in America who comes from them, who comes from, by heritage, those European cultures that I've been talking about, you come from, the origins, like I say, the origins and the originators of all of this, then the culture that you're in is the culture that you came from. And is what came from your culture. You understand? So you don't have an alternative culture to try to connect to. The BTK killer, he had children. And those children couldn't go out in the market and try and find themselves some different alternative father to have, some alternative parent. You're stuck with what you're stuck with. And even if you come from the people who used to not be classified as white, there's two things here. There's two things. First of all, you may possibly know that you are of, for example, Irish heritage, like I do, or Italian heritage, or Slavic, or what have you. But most likely, you have no real connection to that heritage at all, except on some sort of, sentimental level, or abstract level, or performative level. The Irish Americans and the Italian Americans are frankly notorious for their performative connection to the homeland, without really having one at all. Most of the time, you don't speak the language. Most of the time, you don't know the history, actually. Most of the time, you've never been there. Maybe you like the food. Unless you're Irish. Maybe you like the food. Maybe you like the music. But you don't think like the Irish people in Ireland or the Italian people in Italy. It's not your culture anymore. That individual culture. Like again, if someone got adopted when they were a little baby and they got raised by their adopted family, and then as an adult, they met their genealogical mother or father, well, to you, that's just some old man. That's just some old woman. They're a stranger to you. You don't know them at all. You weren't influenced by them at all. They didn't shape you. There's just a vague understanding that you're supposed to feel something towards them. You're supposed to feel some kind of a connection, but you don't. In reality, you don't, okay? That's not your culture anymore. I'm talking about the distinct culture of your individual heritage, like specifically Irish or Italian or Polish culture or something like that. So that's one. But the other thing is that anyway, the truth is that even if you could connect to those individual cultures, it's not going to lead to any sort of an improvement for you. Because Europe, the truth is, Europe, continentally, as a whole, is very strange. There's something wrong with them. Wallahi, there's something wrong with them. When I was talking about the history, when I'm telling you about the history, I'm talking about the history across the whole continent. Individual culture after individual culture. Do you understand me? You see all the same characteristics in each one. The jinn worship, the violence, the feudalism, the superficiality, the lack of any real intellectual or moral depth, the adoration and the worship of raw power, brute force, the scavenger mentality, the moral hypocrisy. And in every single individual culture on the continent, you'll see the same unparalleled stubbornness to resist civilizing. So trying to connect with those cultures, the cultures that all melded together anyway to become what America is, that's not going to benefit you in any way whatsoever. Connecting to a culture that is impervious to change so that you can change, now that's not a good strategy. That's not going to get you anywhere. These were not noble people. They weren't virtuous, honorable, decent people with an honorable and decent and virtuous civilization. That's not what existed. Look at the disconnect. Look at the dissonance that Americans and Westerners have. I can't count how many times I've seen Westerners online mocking the people of India, for example, for how easily they were colonized. How just a handful of British soldiers and administrators were able to completely subjugate a vastly larger population, right? I've seen them saying the same sorts of things about Africans, about African slaves in America. And of course, because they have fully integrated the racist programming, they will say that this docility in the part of Indians and Africans, this passivity, this passiveness, demonstrates inferiority. And they'll mock them for being so easy to oppress and control and subjugate. Well, all right. All right. Now, I just told you that 4 out of 5 Europeans was a peasant, was a serf, was a human being who was actually a piece of farming equipment for their feudal masters. They couldn't move, they couldn't marry. The feudal lord even got to sleep with your bride before you did, if he wanted to. And you couldn't do anything about it. You were slaves in everything but name. 4 out of 5 of you. 4-to-1 majority. Like that for 1,000 years. Okay, the British Raj in India was less than 100 years. I mean, sure, the East India Company was there and their reign was longer than that, but it was still nowhere near as long as how long you accepted being farm tools for your feudal masters. And it's even longer than that, actually, if you look at how miserable things were before feudalism was instituted. Now, I don't know of any people in the world who were easier to pacify and easier to subjugate than your people. And that wasn't even from invaders. But you never think about that. You never think about that reality. You think about the great white conquerors. Meanwhile, you yourselves were the most thoroughly conquered and the most obsequious people that you yourselves ever conquered. I mean, think it through. Your whole history, in terms of, as an organized society, in terms of governance, your whole history is one side or the other of the same coin. One side or the other of the same coin, tyranny and cowardice. Tyranny and cowardice in the face of tyranny. Subservience. Means like 3 archetypes. You had the West, you can say the West produced 3 personality archetypes. The tyrant, the slave, and the collaborator. And everyone in the West is one of these 3, I'm telling you. And it's usually pretty easy to spot which one they are. And the tyrant is the one that they all want to be. The tyrant is the one that they all want to be, and you will be able to detect that if you interact with them long enough, even if they're coming to you like a so-called ally. The slave, the collaborator, and the tyrant all have the same instincts in the West. I told you, there is an us and there is a them. Oh, this is going to be a long talk. This is going to be a long talk. Okay, I know it all started with the idea of us being allies with them or them being allies with us. But you just don't comprehend, and I'm trying to help you to comprehend how incredibly different you are from normal people. I mean, just normal people around the world, never mind how different you are from Muslims. I said there's something wrong with you. I said there's something wrong with you. I don't know exactly when it happened in your history, when it started in your history, but you can't not see it. I don't know, maybe your ancestors, too many of your ancestors in prehistory, thousands of years ago, maybe they were too malnourished or something. Allahu alam. Maybe they cannibalized too much and it caused defects or something that got passed down generationally. Wallahi, I don't know. I don't know what caused it. But it goes back very, very far. And then all of these peculiarities of yours got structuralized, got systematized, got institutionalized, and then it turned that all into the dysfunctional, peculiar societies that you have. The peculiar so-called civilization that you have. I mean, the complete imperviousness to development and to change, to me, is really striking and the most striking. You know, Malcolm X, our Mukhtar, the Mukhtar of American Muslims, of revert Muslims, Malcolm X said that the only thing that could save America is Islam, and of course he's right. Of course he was right. But that's not going to happen on a societal level. I don't believe so. I don't believe that's going to happen on a societal level. The best that you can do is embrace Islam yourself as an individual, one by one. Save yourself. Because that so-called civilization is not going to change ever. They are never going to change. They only became Christian in the first place because Christianity enthusiastically adapted to suit their whims. Christianity easily catered to their desires, and Christianity was elastic enough to become whatever they wanted it to be, which was whatever they already had. And that's what Christianity became, what they already had. Well, you can't do that with Islam. Western so-called civilization is the proverbial immovable object. It doesn't give. It doesn't give an inch. Whatever comes to it becomes like it. You don't change it, it changes you into it. Well, that's impossible with Islam. Europe had the chance. They had a chance to embrace Islam for hundreds of years. But subhanAllah, even those European countries that basked in the benefits of the Muslims, like Spain, like Sicily, even after being part of the Muslim world and becoming centers of sophistication, centers of learning, centers of prosperity, subhanAllah, they fought their way out of sophistication and learning and prosperity. I talked about it before, the Austrians, the drunken, landless peasants who stupidly fought against the Ottomans in order to preserve their own oppression under their aristocracy. Subhanallah, until today, they'll beat their chest at being successful in rescuing their misery from the threat of peace and prosperity under the Muslims. That's one of Pete Hegseth's tattoos. The date that Austria saved itself from the prospect of a decent society. Same as now. Banning Muslim immigration to the U.S. because goodness knows we can't have all these non-alcoholic, non-drug addicted, unpromiscuous, stable families coming to our country. God forbid. We don't want God-fearing people here, praying all the time, fasting all the time, giving charity. America's not that kind of party. But he was right. Of course, Malcolm X was right, obviously. It's not just a throwaway line. It's not just rhetoric. When he said that, he meant it. Only Islam can save America. I know it's the last thing that you want to hear. I know you don't want to hear it. But even if I was not a Muslim, anyone should be intelligent enough and objective enough to see that this is, in fact, the only sensible, practical, workable option that you have as Americans. I mean, just look at so-called black and white. Like I say, just look at it in terms of their terms, their framework, black and white. If you're so-called white, you cannot connect or reconnect with your culture from your lands of origin. You can't do that if you come from European ancestry because you're already living in it. And it's already horrendous. There's no way out from there. That's not the way out. And if you're so-called black, your ancestry is in Africa. Never mind what the so-called FBAs want to pretend about being indigenous. I'm talking to serious people. I'm talking to serious people only. I'm talking to adult, mature, serious people. Anyone who calls themselves an FBA, no, you're FBI. That's a COINTELPRO psyop through and through just to keep you as a so-called minority in that country. But even if you are African American and you know that you are African American, you understand me? You know that that your descendants are from Africa. In this case, the descendants of enslaved people. It's not easy to know your pre-American lineage in Africa. Sometimes you can't even know your lineage inside the United States in America, most people. Most Americans at this point only know their family history back 2 generations, maybe 3 generations. Like they'll know their grandparents, maybe. They'll know maybe their great-grandparents. But even knowing their great-grandparents, that mostly just means their names. They don't know much else. And those DNA tests, those don't actually tell you anything. Not really. They don't tell you anything about where you truly came from. That's just a scam to collect your samples for a database. So it's very hard for Americans, for all types of Americans, but especially for African Americans. It's very difficult to even locate their original culture, to even locate their place of origin, their culture of origin. I've said it before. If you put indigenous people aside, obviously, the Native American people aside, obviously, I think it's fair to say that African Americans, by all rights, are the most American that you can be. The most purely American, because they were cut off from their origins, completely cut off. They, as a community, are the creation of America. So I can understand why African Americans would maybe reject the idea of connecting themselves with Africa or trying to feel an affiliation with Africa or something like that, because the truth of the matter is that they are the most unique and the most distinct community in the United States. For all intents and purposes, they don't have a pre-American history, you understand? For the entire time that they have been in that country, they have been defined as black people, a fictional category of humanity that's not associated with any land or any history or any origin, except for the origin of the invention of the category itself. You understand? I mean, the estrangement and the disconnection that I talked about with regards to so-called white Americans, the disconnection that they have in relation to their lands of origin, that's infinitely magnified for African Americans. I mean, even that term, African American, that signifies a whole continent, not a country, a whole continent, not even a region of a continent. And like, say you try to connect. If you're African American and you try to connect somehow, even superficially, like you get some clothes or something, some decor, some artifacts or what have you, to try to Africanize your living space. Okay, first of all, you may or may not know whether or not any of these artifacts or these things actually come from or actually represent where your particular family came from. And secondly, you might not even be getting it right. You might not even be getting it right. Mixing and matching random symbols or random artifacts or what have you, crafts and so forth. That if someone from Africa saw that, they might see it and say, well, that doesn't make any sense. They'll immediately look at it and say, that doesn't make any sense. These things come from two completely different tribes in two completely different regions or something. So it's an almost completely unfixable conundrum for African Americans, in my opinion. Americans, whether they are so-called white or whether they are so-called black, they are completely isolated, completely insulated, completely disconnected, and completely adrift. Marooned in that country. Like I said, it's like you're at the bottom of a well. It's like you're at the bottom of a well, just existing in that country and carrying the mentality of a country that is itself the product of a history that you've been lied to about, that you don't even know, or that you have been cut off from if you're African American. You have origins that none of you have a plausible option to connect with as a way out of the well. You're trapped in a world of fiction. White is a fiction and black is a fiction. But where you are, in your society, both are real, which means that you are trapped in a world of fiction. Do you understand me? And the real world is inaccessible to you, even while the real world impacts you. The real world impacts you, but you can never understand what's happening because the real world does not operate according to the rules of your fictional world.
Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you are doing great from wherever you're watching this video from. Again, I'm your host and presenter Agent Stories. It is always a good time to come around and talk about one of the most critical things. The reality that they fear that we will know. It's the same reality that right now it's out there. And it is funny that they cannot do anything about it because we are all getting to see the truth. We are all getting to see their true colors. We are all getting to see who they really are. And this, we're just seeing it in a broad daylight. The truth is just out there. We are seeing everything that they lied about. So first, thank you to Shade Bolson for exposing all this truth. I know, black people, this is not something that you didn't know. You knew the truth always. But let me say that it is always good to hear it from a person that doesn't look like you, a different perspective of the truth, giving it a different touch. Brothers and sisters, I've always been saying this, and I've said this for the longest time. The person that has or own a pen and a paper will always write a different side of the story. And this also reflects in our media, also portray some people. Because we have people that control the media. So it means that they have the power to control the narrative. And that's how it has always been for black people. The narrative has always been controlled by white people. So even though the accounts that are given are not the true accounts, they are lies. There are a couple of lies that they are always given. So if you're trying to ask yourself this question, you just get to realize that there are so many lies that have been said about black people, even black people being called savages. All those were lies. They found black people living peacefully. They found black people having their own lives. They found black people doing their own shit. Like they just figured it out without white folks. But they came and destroyed everything good that black people had. So when you get to see everything that is happening right now, you just get to understand that the accounts that we are being given, the side of the truth that white people shared in their own perspective, it only gave their victories. It only gave the things that they did. Some even lied about inventions that they did, but you get to realize that black folks are the ones who came with all these inventions that right now we are getting to see. So when you get to look at the truth, when you get to just zoom in and get to have your own perspective of the truth, you get to realize that majority of us, we've been played, we've been lied to. They have told us things that you can't expect from things that you cannot expect. But they put themselves as the one who did them. So when you get to see all these scenarios, it's just crazy. It's just something not to be celebrated. But I'm glad that the truth is out there. And I'm glad that everyone gets to see the truth. I'm glad that everyone gets to understand how the truth works. And as I usually say, everything you do in the dark will one day come to light. So, brothers and sisters, please let me know what you all think about this. I didn't have much to say, honestly, but I just wanted to, share my 2 cents in regards to this and just let you know the truth is out there. It's upon you to decide whether you want to stay in the light, you want to stay in the dark, or you want to find light. So if you want to find light, make sure that you have subscribed to my channel so that I can get to share with you some good content that all of us can learn from. So please let me know what you all think about this video. And as you know, I'm your host and presenter, Ejitech Stories, and I just want to say thank you for those who are always tuning in, watching my videos. Man, I'm grateful for all the support that you all are giving me. You just don't know. But I'm grateful, really grateful. So, until then, I'm hoping to see you on my next video. Until then, peace, love, and harmony. Salute.